Hey everyone, welcome back to You Are What You Love. I'm your host, Marissa Tandon, and today's episode is part 2 of last week's conversation with writer Alex Whisenhunt about the musical TV phenomenon Glee. If you haven't listened to part 1, be sure to head back to the last episode and catch up before starting this one. If you're all caught up, enjoy the rest of our chat about how one high school Glee club changed the world.
I feel like Rachel Berry had kind of like a mixed reaction as a character. Like, I don't really know how many people were rooting for her the whole time or really enjoyed her while they were watching Glee. Like I said, I remember kind of relating, but only because I was like, I want to be the star, you know? But I didn't really, I'm not sure I found her likable. And so now I think maybe Leah's in this space of trying to be like, how much, it feels like she's trying to figure out like how much of Rachel Berry, like how much of this person is real that now people have kind of projected onto her.
Yeah.
And it's this like really, again, it's this like melting together of I can't tell like what is you and what is this character that is like still being carried through your life, because here you are doing something that the character did on the show.
So like, but the thing that's interesting about that to me too is that like I didn't know who she was before, but when you go back and look at her life, like she was sort of this character beforehand. Like she was a child star, like she was obsessed with Broadway, like that's what she wanted to do. So it's like, is it that this character, and this is what I love about the separation, is that you get to be able to have these conversations and not know the answers.
Right.
But it's like, is this character, like, did they just pick a really good person to play her and now she's sort of like obsessing over it now? Or was this character like really formed around this person who already existed and now she's just trying to live her life and she can't shed the skin because it's her skin? It's like those things I do really miss about the separation of that.
Yeah, because, you know, the discoveries that we're having about Lea Michele, everything is like it's happening all after the fact, as opposed to where, you know, TV shows today, like you see the show and then immediately the actor is like on TikTok being like memeing a portion of the episode, being like, oh, well, did you guys like it? You know, and it's like, whoa, this is happening so fast now. I can't even like get into it, you know?
Yeah. I agree. And it's like there's sometimes I think, and maybe this is just my like taste, sometimes I think people do it well.
Sure.
And you're like, oh, that was really fun and I enjoyed that. But I'm like, don't do it every day.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And everyone doing it for all of it. It's just which is what will happen if it works once for someone.
And to go back to someone I was ragging on earlier, like I do think Penn Badgley has had some hits that he's done. And I'm actually like, this is very funny.
He's one of the ones I'm like, I would take more content if I'm happy to see more.
Because you know what it is? I think his content is really funny because I still don't know anything about him.
I know,
And I think that's why like it works really well because he's not getting on and telling me like what he ate in a day. He's like getting on and doing little dances. And I'm like, you seem like a nice guy. And that's all I want.
That's all I want. And I'm like, don't do anything to disprove this little like goofy image that I'm building.
That's it. Like I think but certain people are doing it really well. Yeah. There's also an actress who was on the Vampire Diaries. She played Caroline Forbes and her name is Candace King. She is another one where I'm like, every once in a while she makes like a little video and she's doing like a TikTok transition. Yeah. And you can tell she's trying really hard. Yeah. And she's like, I did this 400 times, like, please like it. And I'm like, I think you're funny and sweet and like that's the type of thing I think is really enjoyable. Yeah. It's like I want you to acknowledge that the internet exists, but don't acknowledge this little corner where we're trying to talk about you. Right. And that's really what it is. It's like I was in my little club. We were talking about the things that we liked and we didn't like last week. And now you seem to be here. Yeah. And we were talking about you.
Yeah. And it's awkward. And I think we should still be able to talk about you, but you need to leave.
Yeah. Like it's sort of like that lunch table where like everyone shuts up when you arrive because they were definitely just talking about you. Yeah. But I'm like, but it's sort of like, I don't think that my TV show should come to my lunch table. You know what I mean?
Well, and they're sitting down almost and initiating the conversation. Yeah. Being like, what do you guys think? Yeah. And it's like, this isn't the way we do this. Up. Yeah. I want to tell you something. I'll come to you.
Yeah. It's like, I'll send you a little a little message. Yeah. I'll let you know. Yeah. Otherwise, stay out.
Step back.
Stay out of my swamp. Yeah. Well, the other thing though that I am curious about is we've talked a lot about TikTok, and one of the things that Glee really did, as you mentioned, was introduce people to music in a way that like TikTok is doing now too.
Oh yeah,
in like and I do think that was because it was a jukebox musical. There was always music that like did you connect with your mom at all about some of that music as it was airing? Because you mentioned that she was like, this is sucking me in.
Yeah, I mean, mostly it was just her being like, this is so smart, you know, and asking and being like, do you know this song? Like, did you know this previously? Yeah. And me being like,
absolutely
no,
not.
Yeah.
You
know? Yeah, no, if anything now it's just kind of a, I can always test a crowd by if a song comes on. This is so, this is one of the things that people I feel like tweet about former Gleeks. But it's like, if somebody hears a song and they're like, oh, I heard this on Glee. Or like the Glee, what they said was someone saying the Glee cover is better, which I'm not sure I would ever go so far to be that person, but for some things. But to say like, oh yeah, I heard this on Glee, or I know it from Glee, and to have that, and you're always going to have like one other person who's like same, or somebody who's like, oh, totally, who gets it and is like, yeah, duh. Like that is the way you would know this stuff.
I will say I have been places, like I've been out and I've had like the Glee cover played.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, correct.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it is. It's out there. It's cultural. I remember I was on a dating app and one of the questions that somebody was asking for the prompt was like, tell me what your favorite Glee cover is. Like that's one of the things I want to know from you is like your favorite Glee song. And I was like, it's actually a very important question to me. I'm glad that you're asking.
There is a wrong answer. You know what I mean? There's multiple wrong answers.
Yeah, there are multiple wrong answers. There are plenty of right ones. But I think it's one of those things. It's like, what's your favorite? If you can name that, what does that say about someone? It says something what their favorite Glee cover is. And I love that it says something
What's
when you
your
get that
favorite
answer.
Glee cover?
I love the mashup that they did that was It's Any Way You Want It, and it's called like Any Way You Want It, Lovin', Touchin'. See, I don't even like know the original songs. It's very sad. People are gonna listen to that and be like, these are real songs and you're just saying words. But yeah, it's their Any Way You Want It, Lovin', Touchin', Squeezin'.
What episode is it from?
It's oh my gosh, they're performing at nationals. It's like
I can hear it in my head. I just can't remember what like thing it was,
because like a nationals, regionals, something. It's one of their like final performance, big things, numbers, and it's such a fun song. That was one of the things too, is the mashups they created. That was not new music, but it was a new way to listen to these songs, and they were always great.
They were so much fun.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about there was one mashup episode that still sticks in my brain to this day.
Tell me.
It's when they split them up, girls versus guys, in the Glee episode.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And the girls accidentally take caffeine
drugs.
pills or something like that. Yeah. And they're like on uppers and losing it.
Yeah, and they sing Halo.
Yes.
They sing a mashup of Halo and Walking on Sunshine.
Yes.
Yeah, losing their freaking minds.
They're like out of control. And you're watching and you're like, they're moving so fast.
It's so funny.
And the guys did
one of them was Confessions.
Yeah, and this ain't a song for the broken hearted.
Yeah.
And they mashed that up with Confessions.
Yes.
In that episode.
That episode was, oh my God, that episode was so good. Those performances were so. See, I loved the mashups. I loved when Glee gave us something new. Because the covers were obviously like very, very fun and people were talented. But whenever they were able to give us like a new version of something, it was just so fun.
I don't know if you felt this way, because you bring up the idea of like something new.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that to me made Glee work as well as it did and connect with as many people as it did was, I think a lot of like what we were served in high school was high schoolers that were having these like very glamorous, wild lives that we didn't relate to at all.
Yeah.
So like I've talked about like the Gossip Girl effect before, which was like Gossip Girl, everyone watched it.
Yeah.
I was like, I am so far removed from what is happening to these characters.
Yeah.
There are teenagers sleeping with princes. I have no idea what is happening. They seem to be able to walk into whatever bar they want.
Yeah.
Like
what
after
are the
school,
rules?
There are no rules. And to me, it wasn't even about like, oh, I have rules and I could never do this. It was like, I don't even know how you would do what they're doing. You know what I mean? I was just so far away from it.
Yeah.
And Glee, in a sense, because there was also like, I watched One Tree Hill, and that was sort of like, that wasn't necessarily the opulence, but it was still this like very cool people doing very cool things. And even the outcasts, you were like, okay. But that's Chad Michael Murray.
Right. Yeah. So
let's take a breath. So like these like high school sort of like dramas or soap operas that we had were very much like centered on people that were aspirational to some degree.
Right.
Whereas Glee felt like the first time it was people who were very much on your level.
Yeah.
But they were still experiencing these wild things in life.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many like stories we've had like that were very just like genuinely like easy. You could look at that character and be like, I know someone like that, or I feel this way.
Yeah.
And so like this actually could happen to me. A prince? No.
You convince, even though the stories like were ridiculous and so many moments were larger than life, there was this part that felt so relatable.
Yeah.
Even though so much of it was so ridiculous, that tie was enough to be like, yeah, you know, like this could happen to me. Like I could know someone faking this pregnancy. Like I could know someone doing like these crazy things, but it's because those characters were, you know, what you like, just so much more.
I don't know, something about it was just like I certainly wasn't a cheerleader, but like, and also that was the other thing. I actually didn't know most of those people because I went to an all-girls school.
Yeah.
Like most of these people I don't know, like I don't relate to them, but there's something more accessible about them, I guess.
Yeah.
Is maybe the point.
Yeah. I think it's because there were so many like archetypes sitting there, and it was like, we're going to give you a little bit of everyone.
Everything.
So even if there isn't an exact character that you relate to, somebody's going to do something that you would have done.
Yeah.
Someone's going to make the same decision that you would have made in that moment.
There's also something a little magical about one person from every social group coming together for music.
And I like an ensemble cast like that is always going to be a win for me. You know, any kind of moment where it's like, okay, we've got a train car full of people, and it's like, what are all the different people who might get stuck together, and now they have to be an unlikely group.
Yeah.
And having it where it's so like one of each flavor so exactly is just incredibly satisfying in terms of a cast, I feel.
Do you feel like it has influenced your taste at all in sort of like what you like now and what you like to make? Or do you feel like it sort of is its own thing?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. That's such a good question because I love the ridiculousness of Glee, but I also wonder if anyone was like, your stuff reminds me of Glee.
How you would feel
be like,
about that?
oh, thank you. You know, I'm like, I don't know about that. But there's something so like ridiculous and relatable, which feels like, yeah, that's the path I want to live on. Like those are the two sides I want to oscillate between. Yeah.
There's something nice about it. I do think like I agree if someone was like, this reminds me of Glee, I would be like,
what? Are you sure?
I don't know what to say to that.
Which episode specifically? Because, you know, it runs the gamut there. So,
but I think there's something to the same degree that we talked about Kenny Ortega, right? I think there is something to being able to say like this inspired a generation.
Yeah.
Whether that inspiration feels to you as though it was like artistic or worthwhile or those types of things, it does as absolutely off the walls as that show was, like there is not one person on this earth who hasn't heard of it. Maybe there is, but
no. I'm like, you at least know it. And it's the kind of thing too where, you know, if someone's never seen it, they can totally jump into it in this moment. And if you don't know anything about it except that it existed, I still feel like the people and characters exist far enough away that you can fall into this like crazy ridiculous hole if you've never experienced it before.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job of just keeping you hooked the whole time.
Yep.
And there is something, some people say that like musicals are a cheat because like how can you not enjoy a good song?
Yeah.
Right? But like at the same time, I'm sort of like, yeah, but like those mashups, the picking the right song, making those songs fun, arranging all of those songs to be connected to characters that like you have to fit the right character into the right part. And then also like such a point of tension of that show from week to week was like, this person gets to sing this song.
Yeah, it was always looking for the solos. And I just remember getting so excited every episode because I was like, what songs will they do? I was just so excited to find out what music they were going to perform and who was going to get to sing that week. I was always so sad when like the second or third song would roll around and I'd be like, we're done with the music for this episode. Like, I'm pretty sure we're not getting any more.
Yeah. And then you had it on your little iPod.
Yeah.
Was it an iPod Classic, an iPod Nano?
Probably it was my Classic at that point.
Yeah.
We were
Love a
loading
little
stuff
Classic.
on. Yeah. I know. I miss it.
I do miss an iPod.
I know.
Do you know why?
Why?
I miss having something that didn't have the other apps
A
on
phone
it.
on it.
Yeah. Like, because now you can't really like play music without having anything,
Yeah.
and you just end up doing other
Yeah.
things. I miss maybe I am really desperate to revert back to
Listen,
a time in my life that was not great either.
Well, I know, but I'm like, the technology's gone too far. Like, we gotta
remove it.
pedal it back. It's a little bit too much.
Way too much. Way too much. I just, you know what it is? I'm tired of being like, not necessarily being perceived, but having to perceive myself all the time.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Sometimes I just want to listen to music.
Yeah, and not think about like myself, my feelings, unpacking whatever's No,
I don't want to
no,
unpack it. I want to listen to Don't Stop Believing.
I want to listen to Rose's Turn by.
It's also like sometimes I think about the way that I have associations. I don't know if you feel this way also, but I have associations with music from that show that I would not have associations to that music in particular otherwise. Like Santana sings If I Die Young, and I actually had never heard that song before. And she sings it it's such an emotional moment in the show. It's such an emotional moment for her. It's such an emotional performance. And it is such a stunning song. And it makes me sad every time I listen to it now because of what happened in Aya. And like it is but I would not have an association to that song at all if it weren't for Glee.
Right. And it's an association that feels like really powerful and lives outside of the show, you know, and that's again that thing that you kind of carry the music with you, and you're able to take that outside of the show and just kind of keep all of that with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's big. It's a big one. I am curious about the fact that you went from not a tiny small town, but like you're sort of like you described, a smaller town lifestyle, and connected with Glee with friends, and chose to go to performing arts college.
Yeah,
Do you feel Glee and your life of wanting to perform had any sort of any sort of impact on getting you there?
Yeah, definitely. Because, you know, again, this show was so much, it felt about high schoolers trying to find their stardom and create their own stardom through any means possible. And like Rachel even does it by like self-filming. It seems like she's not putting it on YouTube, but it seems like MySpace or something like that adjacent. And that's how I felt. That's what from that show, I was like, yes, this is what I want to be doing. Like, I want to try, and I don't know what it looks like exactly, but I want to build my stardom. I want to find this. And it kind of led me down that more. It was already there, but it like emphasized these passions I had for storytelling. And, you know, obviously I enjoyed being on the stage, but I wasn't brave enough to really like push through in that path. So I was like, I have to find another way to exercise this passion and be able to do this storytelling. And that is what kind of, I think, led me on this entire path to go to a performing arts based college, or a really like art heavy college. And I was like, maybe I'll get to find my like, you know, whatever, the little group of misfits. Or really what happened was, if I really think about it, going on the tour for school, what I heard on the tour was they were like, everyone who has felt like an outcast or kind of like a misfit in high school, when they come here, they feel like they belong. Like this is kind of a place for them. And I heard that and I was like, I know this narrative. Like I've heard this story before, like
once a week.
Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is my place, like where the people get to come, like those characters, they get to characters. I know I'm a real person. I understand that, but how they get to like come together. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's just mirroring that.
I sort of know the answer to this, but like, did you feel like you got that? Did you sort of build your narrative?
Yes, I absolutely did. Yeah, totally. Just like, yes.
100%.
I did. No, I totally feel like I found my little creative space, and it was completely different than show choir. Show choir was not the ultimate outlet, but if I really think about the organizations that I joined and the spaces I got to be in, like, I was definitely trying to like mimic that kind of creative space.
Do a little role play.
Yeah. I was like, but there were no jocks, you know. There was no like, there
were some, you just had to seek them out. Like you had to find,
right. They just weren't. They weren't in the
not,
space.
Not in the same way. Yeah, it certainly wasn't high school.
It wasn't high school, and we still were like, not that cool. So, that's what it was.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. The one thing I also we have to talk about is that you've alluded to this.
Yeah.
Season 1, personally, I think was quite well done.
Yes.
The show does go off the rails at a certain point.
Yes.
And I am curious about when you were experiencing it, how you felt. Like, did you hold on to the show? You made it through season 5.
Yeah.
You still look back on it with a fondness.
Yeah.
What did you do when you started to feel dissatisfied with the narrative?
I think that's kind of why I started to fall off towards the end. Because I think, so there was actually somebody they wrote an article about, like, I think they called it like the 3 or 4 times that Glee should have ended. And it was like all the different points at which Glee could have ended and been like a really good show with like a satisfying, good end.
Yeah.
And one of those endings was at the end of season 1. Like, it was like,
if
it had just ended there. It could have been great, you know? And there are other moments outside of that where it's like, we could have ended here. We could have ended here. And so the point that there are so many points like that, I think I was definitely holding on that it was still going to end up in a good place and it was still going to resolve in a satisfying way. But probably, I stopped watching eventually because I was like, it's just, I don't even know what we're doing anymore. And really what I feel like what killed the show was that it's a high school cast, right? And high schoolers graduate. Sure. And I think what really kind of, not to use jumped the shark for them was that they tried to continue to follow these characters into college. And so we were having to jump between like New York and Ohio and like wherever people were. And I was like, it's just not the show we were doing before. And they just weren't able to, for me, if I were going to rewrite it, it would be with the intention of like, this is the group that we're going to follow. And once like this group is no longer able to perform all in high school together, then the show is done. Like, that's where we have to end it.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't feel completely satisfying, we don't get to see them chase their dreams. Like, that's the point, you know? And so when it started to kind of fall off, I was like, oh, I think I lost hope and then was like, it's too hard to keep up with this now that I'm in college. So
I do think you raised an interesting point, which is like the high school to college transition in television shows.
Yeah.
There are so few shows that have made it work.
Yeah.
And I think the shows that do make it work are not ensemble casts.
Right. Because that's the whole point, is that they were an ensemble. And now you've split your ensemble up.
Exactly. Well, and it's like there's the only shows that I think ensemble casts have worked with the move is when they all move to the same place. Like Buffy the Vampire Slayer does that very well. They sort of like all go to college together.
Yeah.
So it's
right. So if you do that, then like
it's like simple.
Right.
Even then there were some bumps in that transitionary season, and like you're like, I don't know if this is working. And then they, eventually hit their stride. But it's mostly because they move all the same characters to the same place.
Yeah.
And the characters that don't work are the ones that they add. And you're like, I hate this dude.
Yes.
That was
they did the Glee project, unfortunately, and they started like shoving these new characters in, and it was just kind of like, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to care about these new high school. Like, I don't really understand why
it came. Yeah. I will say, like, I think it's interesting because I think it sort of gets into this battle of like the story's really popular, but the story might be done.
Yes.
And learning how to like accept that.
It's one of the things that bothers me the most when people making television is that I understand that it's a business and people are trying to make money. And so when your TV show is doing really well, it's like, let's just keep making episodes. But I have so much respect for like TV show creators who do it with the intentionality of, I know how this story needs to end. Like, I know the beginning and I know the end, and I'm going to write my story regardless of, I'm not going to try and lengthen it just because it's doing really well. Yeah. And I think if only Ryan had gone in with more intentionality as to like what the ending was going to be, because it became so clear that it was like, we're just trying to get as much like capital out of this as we can before it runs out.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting because I think it's a very American television problem. It's not solely, but like one of the things that I'm so jealous of creatively on British television is that sometimes like we're watching Starstruck right now together, and like that is a show that they were like it's 6 episodes, and each season follows this, and this is exactly it. Could you have milked it for 10? Maybe, but the story is 6 episodes and they're 20 minutes each, and that's what it works, and like following that. And like miniseries that are like it's over. Like I think about that all the time with like Big Little Lies. It was supposed to be a limited series. The first season was really good, and then it was so popular that they were like, let's make a second season. And it's like, how? Like and they did it and it was fine. It is what it is, but it's like sometimes you can't just keep going. Sometimes the story's over.
And the thing that made me sad about the end of Glee, which I
think it's okay.
Okay. I mean, whatever. But like they tie everything up so neatly. There's no question marks at the end. It's like, here's the direct path that everyone is going, and you're seeing everybody not sitting in the same room, but like essentially just being all in the same room. And it's kind of like, okay, cool. They all accomplished their dreams. Like, and I'm like, okay, but what's left now? Like I don't get to put anything else on
I think that's what's hard about a show that starts like the fantasy of like the high school narrative, like the high school shows really is the same fantasy that you have as a high schooler,
right?
Which is that there's something more to come.
Yeah.
And if you take me past and show me that the something more to come actually sometimes sucks, the hope of that sort of goes away. And then you're sort of like, this is what adulthood is, and it's like right. I don't know that I want to know that.
Yeah, or to realize like, you're seeing these people accomplish their dreams at, they're like 25. Like and it's like, okay, what's the rest of their life supposed to look like now?
Right.
What is the rest of their what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
You were supposed to leave that open-ended so that I could picture their dream and them chasing it, possibly getting it for the rest of their life.
Right.
Not to show me like we've done it. I don't know what comes next. Like
we still have a whole life to live,
right.
But at least we did it.
Yeah, but everything that you've heard about has been done. So it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. It's like a lack of sort of allowing me to believe that these characters live on.
Yeah.
Sort of almost.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like they stop here. This is the end, and there is no more for them because they did what they set out to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you generally prefer narratives that leave that open for you?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I know I love a TV show when the final episode ends and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like and not in like that sounds bad. Not in like a cliffhanger way, but just in like like I needed more, but realizing that I have to give myself that more. That is the only way that I feel really good about an ending is when I'm like given just enough to be like, oh, yeah, I wanted more.
Yeah.
And I can't have it.
Do you have a show that you can think of that gives you that?
BoJack Horseman. I feel like the ending of it is so like, it's honestly perfect to me. It's just like it just ends and the more you think about it, the more you're like, you can't have any more.
Yeah. I am a very big fan of that show. I think they do a very good job of giving you exactly what they intended to give you.
Yes.
Everything about it feels very intentional.
Yeah,
very well done.
That's I mean, it's so funny to be like to imagine that any part of Glee was intentional. But that's the thing is that the last 2 seasons, I feel like there's just zero intentionality. It feels like they're just throwing things at the wall and being like, what is going to stick? Because when you start the show, it's like you have all these really intricate plot lines. You can see, you're like, oh my gosh, the way this is going to unfold is going to be so dramatic. There's so much going into this. And then by the end, it's blown up into these giant proportions where maybe they just weren't able to like keep that ridiculousness running at a realistic level. And I feel like they lose the relatability kind of. And that's why it goes.
That's fair.
Yeah.
One of the things that we talked about earlier with this show is that sometimes it felt like fandom was able to make things happen.
Yeah.
Like the fans were able to say like, this is what we want, this is what we want, this is what we want. And at some point it sort of broke through and made it into the show.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things that we actually talked about on a different episode of this show when we were talking about a Harry Potter musical was Darren Criss making it into the show and becoming Blaine and becoming the famous man he is today.
Yeah.
So Darren Criss being like on Glee really felt like this moment where it was like someone who had become very well known because of the internet, because
Yeah.
of putting things on. And one of the things we talked about like at this era was that the Instagram influencer wasn't really a thing, but I do think the YouTube star was a huge thing.
Yep.
And something that you've talked about is like this idea that on Glee it was teenagers making a name for themselves based off of their talent, which was YouTube as well.
Yes. Yep.
Like that was how you could sort of like put videos of yourself on the internet doing something that was a talent, whether that talent was like still it's like stupid videos or like prank videos or singing or like various different things, comedy, reporting the news, like various things, but you were essentially doing something of entertainment value and that required a skill to some degree, I would think.
And it felt like the most universal place to go viral at the time.
Yeah.
You know, like
And
everyone was
to
on YouTube.
be seen. Yeah. And so it was interesting because when we're talking about this like era of there is no Instagram influencer yet, there is sort of like a talented influencer, like a talented viral. And Star Kid, their whole thing, like a Harry Potter musical, went viral because they put it on the internet, but they didn't record it with the intention of going viral. They recorded it with the intention of like everybody being able to see it like after they and it's poorly like it's poor quality, and like it just happened like they put it on YouTube in like 100 parts because it was back when you could only do 10-minute videos and like so many people were like, oh, this is amazing, but it went so popular, and then Darren Criss just sort of gets like plucked out of it into stardom. So did you feel like watching someone do exactly what you're like thinking could happen with this show? Obviously, then they try to replicate it with like the Glee project. But at that moment, it was really genuinely natural. It was like this person who is very talented, who did a very talented thing, put it on the internet by virtue of hope, luck, and a prayer, goes and becomes well known, and then gets plucked out of Michigan. I'm sure he did more work than this, but like the narrative is we found this guy on the internet making little musicals, and we're gonna put him in this little musical. And he looked good too. But did it feel like it was selling you the same thing that you were sort of being sold narratively? Like narratively you're being told these outcasts can come together and perform and be a rising star. And then in real life, this person who like maybe not like the coolest person in theory because he's spending his college years making a Harry Potter fan musical, gets plucked out of obscurity and thrown into stardom. Like, I don't know.
That's one of the things that's so interesting about Glee is that what was playing out outside of Glee was kind of like you were saying, that story that they were selling within it, and they were fabricating it to be like, it happens in the show, this is the narrative, and also it does happen in real life. Like, see how it happens and how like this is a relatable story, you know, like because they're creating it in both spaces, kind of is what it felt like. That answer the question you asked?
I think so. I guess what I
It's just
wonder
more amusing.
No, it's like I guess what I wonder about Glee is that it's like sometimes I do feel like they did a really good job of selling this fantasy of like you can be an outcast and you can be a star. Like that, and it's not the first time that story's ever been sold.
No,
but it is this like phenomenon that they were able to create of I always think about the fact that not everyone in that show is an outcast, right? Like, but they're allowing themselves to sort of become outcast by joining this group.
Joining it. Yeah, it's funny because it's like the outcast kids find a community, and then the popular kids by joining it become outcasts in their previous communities.
But it's interesting because like to me, I think what Glee did was they were able to kind of tap into this feeling that everybody has as a teenager, which is like, I don't feel like I fit in necessarily, or I feel like I belong and I really want to. And I think the one thing Glee did that was really different was the idea that like you can fit in and still feel like you don't. And like still feel like you have something else that you want out of life. And like I think that was maybe something that they did that worked really well and connected with people so well, was this like, okay, like Rachel Berry, the people are throwing slushies on her and like whatever. But sometimes like okay, maybe your high school experience isn't that bad, but it doesn't mean you don't feel like alone, or you don't feel like you don't fit in this group. And there is still a group for you to eventually feel that way.
And in the meantime, like you have Glee every week to be like, this is my group, and they all understand how I feel and what I'm feeling. So it's not just me.
Yeah, and also one day Gwyneth Paltrow might want to come on your show.
Yeah, and teach the kids sex ed for some reason.
One last thing that I want to touch on for sure that you mentioned that I think I didn't process it until you said it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, we have to dig into that.
Yeah.
The idea that technically speaking, Will Schuester is the main character of Glee.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am fascinated by that. And you said it, so I got to follow your train of thought.
Well, yeah, because it opens on him, right? Like first it begins on Will Schuester, and it's like this whole thing of he was in the Glee Club, not the star of the Glee Club, mind you. And now he's like a Spanish teacher, which absolute LOL at that whole plot line. Yeah, and wants to come back and like recreate this space for these kids. And I wonder if they felt like they had to make him the main character because, or at least I felt like it, because it was like he was going to stay in the school. Like the other kids might graduate and they might whatever, but he's like
he's always going to be
the teacher,
group.
right? Yeah. Until there was a point when they took him out of the show. Like he got removed for a portion, and it's again, where was the intentionality? Why did that happen? But yeah, and then again too, like he's the one character. He's got like a full arc across the entire. Like, I guess him and Rachel Berry, I guess, would probably put in the same camp ultimately of who is like the main stars of the show, because they are the ones who get like the biggest and fullest arcs across the entire series.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if I think about the beginning and end, it's like it's them too, and their stories kind of figuring it out.
It is interesting to me because I think often we talk about like the main character can sometimes be the least interesting person.
Yeah.
And like people don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, nobody was rooting for Will's story. Like, and what were you even supposed to be rooting for? What was his dream? Like, what are we like, woo? Nobody's watching the show to relate to Will Schuester.
Well, it's sometimes I do wonder, like, I'm like, maybe people were, but they were just older than us,
Well, I wonder because I'm like, was that relatable? Like, I don't know. I wasn't in the right spot in my life.
Yeah, I guess the thing that's different about it is like when you think about where it was airing, it's airing on Fox.
Yeah.
It wasn't on like CW or WB at the time. True. And like it certainly, I mean, it obviously was for like high schoolers were obsessed with it.
Yeah.
But when you think about the storylines that were going on, like you've got someone, as you said, there was a fake pregnancy, there was a real teenage pregnancy, they accidentally take uppers.
Yeah.
We're really getting into the nitty gritty. And there's quite a bit of teacher storylines with like Sue, with Emma, with Will, obviously, and like quite a bit that the show did with adult characters.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting too, that I really forget about all of those storylines.
Yeah, they almost had it was almost kind of like, it was not quite an ensemble with the adults that were there, but there was that cast that was kind of more, like they were the pillars of the cast. Like they were going to stay.
Yeah.
These like, the coaches and teachers and the principal who's like always there. But yeah, it was just like, I never really thought about them as like the people of the show.
Yeah, it's funny because I guess it almost is like, when you really break it down, I guess Will technically was the main character of Glee because the other adults that are there are only there in relation to how they relate to Will.
Right.
Like Sue is trying to take down the Glee Club, and that's upsetting to Will Schuester, this man who has nothing in life other than this Glee Club. You've got Emma, who's only like she's in relation, she's connected as like a love interest. You've got the coach who's connected. I can't even remember. I don't remember a lot of that. But it just in general, like every character, including the kids, technically speaking, are connected through Will Schuester.
Yeah.
And you're right. I guess they were going to stay.
Yeah.
But I think it almost goes back to this idea that we were talking about earlier, which is like, yeah, but what happens next? There's almost not anything, like when you really think about it, am I interested in watching a man who comes back to his former high school to live out his glory days?
Yeah.
No.
No.
Not unless the end of that is on his path to do something else with his life.
Yeah,
right?
I know. And you were like, can you say what the show is about? And in saying it, I'm like, yeah, this man comes back and he is trying to recreate this Glee Club. And that sounds really boring. And like, he's the main, why would I want to watch him do that?
It's so interesting because there's like also an Oscar bait movie in this narrative.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
know? Like
Yep.
there is like a man down on his luck post-divorce with a
Right.
little bit of a drinking problem returns.
Yes. Yeah, there's definitely a story there, but it's not
It's not the story that they made,
no.
But it is interesting because it is sort of like you could see it,
Mhm.
but the end of that movie is him finding purpose in like helping kids or
Right.
in like kids give him his groove back and he departs.
Yeah.
Goes back to his
Yep.
life. And it's interesting because I think a lot about like, oh, if you shifted the story just to this character, what would be different? And it's like a lot of times it's a whole different genre,
Yeah, yeah.
you know?
And to get to like really properly make him the main character, it sounds like it would have to be.
Yeah.
So.
It is interesting too because when you think about like I don't know, maybe we should maybe this is our pitch. This is our Bel Air pitch, right? But like if you really wanted to make Glee a drama, you really could have if it was about this like down on his luck guy that did something that sends him back to his hometown.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
the only job he can get is like returning as a white Spanish teacher in
Yep.
Ohio and is like, I can't believe this is happening to me.
Mhm.
And in that, like realizes that he can help kids by giving them a place to be after school
Yeah.
in show choir and
Yeah.
performing. And he can bring these kids all the way through and they're sort of like it's a different misfit story.
Mhm.
And you can tell that story. And additionally, like one of them's pregnant, one
Yeah.
of them's about to be a teen
Yeah.
mom, dealing with like her religious family and like how to deal with that. Like you actually really could do a gritty drama version of Glee.
Mhm.
I don't know that I would want to watch it.
Yeah, the music elements might not work as
I think they should keep music the exact same.
Oh yeah, the music.
I'm gonna
Tonally,
be
the
very
music
clear.
doesn't change. Yeah.
It's in my pitch, it's the exact same thing. My pitch on this
Yeah.
gritty, dark take.
Yep.
It's sort of like that Ben Affleck movie that they made recently, where he comes and he teaches the high schooler
Mhm.
basketball team.
Mhm.
I don't know why I said it like that. When he coaches the high school basketball team.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of the movie, but I have the trailer very vividly in my head.
Mhm.
That it is a classic narrative.
Yeah.
Of like older guy, middle-aged guy comes back to
Yeah.
help teens and
Yeah.
then that finds his own life purpose.
But the problem with Glee was that they gave him the same ultimate dream as all the students that he was
But that's
also teaching.
There's something wild about that to me because to some degree I know Rachel Berry ends up getting what she wants out of life.
Right.
To some degree, I think the perfect ending to Glee would have been her coming and taking over the Glee Club. Because there's something about that character that to me, and I think maybe this is why I stopped watching when her dreams started coming true, I was really angry about it.
Yeah.
I like really didn't feel like she deserved it. I
Yeah.
thought she was a bad person.
Mhm.
I think like she's very manipulative throughout the entire show and she has the problem of like I believe I am the main character and
Yeah.
I believe all of you are here to support my narrative.
Yeah.
Which as we then later talk about like a lot of the stuff that comes out about Leah Michelle like fits that narrative too.
Yeah.
And that's where those lines start to get blurred. But like to me, I was like, I actually feel that you shouldn't be. So you don't get to be on Broadway.
Yeah.
You have to come
Well,
back to Ohio.
I'm so curious about, what the show would have been like because they did have, Finn's character taking over. They had Finn take over the Glee Club
Yeah.
when Will left for some because he goes to Broadway
Yeah.
at some point, which like, okay.
Which also I think happened because he went to Broadway.
He
in
literally
real life.
was on Broadway.
Yeah, he was in a musical.
Yeah.
Like, and they were like, well,
They were
how
like,
are we gonna make this
What
work?
are we gonna do? Yeah. So they have Finn's character take over the Glee Club, and then Corey Monteith died during the filming,
yeah.
and they had to completely change all of these plot points, and it completely changed the ending of the show. Like it
Yeah.
rippled out all the way through to the ending. And I wonder what would have happened and if there could have been a possibility of like getting that ending of Rachel coming back and like her and Finn taking over the Glee or like whatever,
Yeah.
what could that have looked like if it didn't have to be affected by in these, the ways that they
tragic
do.
way, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It is interesting because it's like I felt the same way about Will Schuester going to Broadway.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, this part doesn't make any sense.
No.
Who's plucking a high school Glee Club teacher out
Yeah.
of Ohio? And
Yeah, and it's like I
throwing
gotta
on
have him.
Broadway?
Yeah.
Like you haven't done any of the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No.
you shouldn't be here.
And that's why it just felt so strange. Like, did you come back to your old high school to create a Glee Club so you could get to Broadway? Because I don't think so, but now it kind of seems like that was the goal, and
Yeah.
that's strange. Like, that's not what I was rooting for.
Interesting in like the idea of an adult who can't let go of their dreams and like living vicariously through these kids.
Yeah.
Again, in my gritty reboot of
Yeah.
Glee.
Yeah.
Where I don't change any of the music. We will be doing Don't Stop Believing in red t-shirts at the beginning. It will be just the same.
Right.
But yeah, no, I think there is something interesting, and it is sort of like this like split narrative of like the adults that are in this show have this desire to live through something that they didn't, whether it's like glory days or unfulfilled dreams with Will.
Yeah.
And then and I don't know, I think there's something like about as a kid watching that too, of like you're not there yet and you're still trying to figure it out. And I don't know, like I think you definitely glom on to sort of like the high school kids of this show, right? But now as an adult, I'm like, I guess that was a pretty sad thing that was happening in the background with these adults.
Yeah. 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 And I don't know, kind of thinking about it, I'm like, what was any of the other adults' goal on the, nobody else had a dream or like a passion or a direction they were trying to move in other than Will.
And it's also the other thing I would say about the kids too, like the high school kids. I don't know that any of them, other than Rachel, really had this dream of leaving or like going to Broadway or these big like unachievable dreams that I remember. I think it grows on.
Yeah.
I think it eventually grows to that. But like at the beginning, the only person that really thinks like I'm gonna be a star is Rachel Berry. And like I think there's something interesting in that too, of being able to see kids that seem like they have it all. So like Finn, Santana, Quinn, like they all feel like, oh, these are like the popular kids. These are like they're at the top of the food chain.
Yeah.
But they're still searching for something.
Yeah. No, it's true. It was very satisfying to have characters who are like, what if high school is as good as it gets for me? Like, what if this is the best? And that was like a plot line for Finn, of him being like, what do I do after I graduate? I was the star. I was all these things. And that was one of the good reasons to go past graduation, I guess, is to get this new kind of storyline. But yeah, I don't know.
Maybe it's just not as enjoyable because you're like, I don't want to think about that.
Right. You're like, oh, that's kind of a kind of a bummer.
Please no. I think it's interesting. And it's also interesting to put them against adults who like Sue Sylvester, like that's the best it did get. Like you know, you're still on sort of like a power trip of trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Maybe Glee was better than we thought.
Well, you know, I always knew.
How do you that's something I'm also interested in, is like how do you deal with the fact that something that's really important to you is kind of universally viewed as bad?
Oh, I mean, I just kind of lean in and agree sometimes. I'm like, I get it, but that's why I can still kind of, it's sort of like a cult classic, but a TV show. Like I love a cult classic movie, Rocky Horror, like all these different big camp, ridiculous things where you watch it and you're like, is it good? No, but like I love it and it's insane and everyone knows it and it's just kind of comforting in that way. And so I sort of feel like Glee is also a cult classic and kind of a TV show sense, where I'm like, yeah, I can understand why you don't think it's necessarily amazing television, but you can't tell me it's not entertaining, which is what it's meant to do. So in that way, I just am like, yeah, we can totally laugh at the ridiculousness, and I will just know in my heart that it still retains the like
importance.
Yeah.
I think there's something also like I say this about a lot of my favorite content is like, just because it was bad doesn't mean it wasn't important.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, that's something that I feel passionately about with Glee, where it's like, yeah, it was bad, but it was also important.
Yeah.
Like that's, and I think, and also, and again, I still stand by, I think season 1 was actually good.
Yes.
I think the pilot was good.
Yes.
And I'll this is the hill I'll die on when it comes to Glee. I think the team behind Glee, that little trio, I think they are really good at the first season of a show.
Yes.
Which is also really interesting because post Glee, they've gone on to do anthology mostly. Like American Horror Story, American Crime Story. Like they have moved into one season of wrapping everything up.
Yep.
And like you said, like Raina said in that article, season 1 of Glee is a great, like it is a satisfying ending.
Yeah.
And you, of course, you wanted to watch more of it, but like if it hadn't gotten renewed, you would have felt satisfied.
Yep. Yeah. Like you got a full story.
Yeah. So mark the day.
Yeah.
Season 1 of Glee was actually good television.
Was good.
And the rest of it was still important.
Right. Right. Right.
So yeah, I think with that being said, it might be time for my final question that I always ask.
Okay.
Which is, if you had never seen Glee, what would be different about you today?
Oh my gosh. I don't think I would be as ridiculous as I am. And I say that with a lot of love for that part of myself. As I got older and went into college, I've always kind of felt like a very goofy person. And I remember sometimes people, my younger siblings would look at me and be like, "And you're the older one? Like you're the adult?" And but I like that. And I just like to live in this silly, ridiculous space, while also trying to maintain like the real person inside. And I don't think I would feel as, I don't know, as free to just be ridiculous, to like lean into the character parts of myself without seeing these people and realizing like, just because you're a misfit today doesn't mean it will be true tomorrow. And even if it is, like, not to not to get too cheesy with it, but there's this Sue Sylvester quote in which she says on her show, where how Sue sees it. There's not much of a difference between a stadium full of cheering fans and an angry crowd screaming abuse to you. They're both just making a lot of noise. How you take it is up to you. Convince yourself they're cheering for you. You do that, and someday they will. And it's funny to have her kind of wrap it up in that way, but that's kind of that feels like the whole mentality of Glee.
Something I like about the way that you've talked about Glee so far, and like how it kind of impacted you in your choices that you made in the future, like where you went to school, what you've done since, and like sort of this quest for, or maybe thirst for, the main character moment, so to speak, is that it doesn't come from a I want to be this beautiful popular Broadway star, right? It comes from a narrative of I'm a misfit, and this will make me kind of fit in, and a found family element of things.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that it's like you may be a misfit, but that doesn't mean that you won't be a star.
Yeah.
And there's something quite lovely about that, I think.
Yeah. That you don't have to change to do it.
And sometimes I think, again, like we talked about with like the popular kids becoming outcasts because of their desire to be a part of this other club.
Yeah.
There's something even nicer about that, which is maybe the only, like, not only you don't have to change yourself to stand out in a crowd, but sometimes like the people who have already changed themselves to be what you think you want to be wish they were sort of stripping that away.
Yeah.
Like the quarterback really does want to sing show tunes.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
his heart's in the song.
Yeah. Who can't love that? Who can't love to know that?
Yeah, I think there's something very nice about that. And I'm glad you had that Sue quote, because I think it's a really nice one.
Yeah.
And that's how Sue sees it.
That's how Sue sees it.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for reminding me that at one point I really actually enjoyed Glee.
I think so welcome.
We've spent so much time as a society being like Glee was really bad.
Yeah.
That like we forget we were watching it.
Yeah, at one point you all loved Glee.
You had to.
Yeah.
You can't hate watch something for as much time as we did.
Yeah.
So that's how Sue sees it.
That's how I sees it.
That's how I see it. No, yeah, I think this was actually very nice. I think I've really, in listening to you talk about how much Glee really mattered to you, I've really remembered that Glee mattered to me. So
nice.
thanks for reminding me to don't stop believing. We're gonna stop making puns.
Yeah, you have to stop before I start singing. So.
Oh my god! No, I'm just kidding. No, I know. That is also the only way I can hear "Don't Stop Believing" now is with the.
Yeah, that they start with that. Yeah.
Yep. Anyway, well, thank you very much. I had a great time, and thank you to everyone for listening to this episode. I hope it was gleeful. Between now and next Wednesday, if you want to keep in touch, you can follow me on social media at Marissa Kumari, anywhere you get your social media fix. You can also sign up for my newsletter by going to our website, tandonproductions.com, clicking on You Are What You Love, and signing up there. I send out an issue with every episode of this podcast. And we just started a Discord server, so if you want to connect with me, with other listeners, and talk about the types of things that we are talking about on this show, you can join that by clicking on the link in the episode description. Until next Wednesday, I hope you are enjoying what you love.